Hi, welcome to Slifox University Sewing Snippets. I'm Sequoia, the blogger behind the machines at sequoialensews.wordpress.com. Today I'm going to give you a quick tutorial on how to complete a full bicep adjustment. This is a pretty simple alteration that'll make a big difference in the fit and the feel of your handmade garments. When I first started sewing, one of the biggest issues I was having is my sleeves weren't fitting properly. They were often too tight and uncomfortable to wear. So what I initially was doing, not knowing any better, was I would just split my pattern in half, add a couple inches in there, and then sew it into the bodice. The problem with that was it fit my bicep correctly, but it left a lot of extra fabric around the top of my sleeve cap that just looked bulky and messy. I've since learned how to fix that, and I'm going to teach you how to make this adjustment as well. So the first thing we need to do is we need to find out the measurement of your bicep, and you can do that easily with a flexible ruler. Just wrap it around your arm, and the fullest part of your bicep is also usually where you flex your muscle. Mine is 19 inches. If you want to make note of what yours is, we'll use those numbers to adjust our pattern. The next number we need to get is the distance from our shoulder, where our sleeve would normally rest, that seam, down to our bicep area where it's the fullest. Mine's about 6 inches, and that's the drop, which is the point that we're going to add the extra distance to make our pattern fit correctly. So the first thing we can mark on our pattern is, mine is 6 inches, yours is going to be something else, but start at your seam allowance, measure down, mine is 6 inches, and that'll be our first mark. We can also note that, I already know, but you'll measure your pattern from seam allowance to seam allowance. The width of mine is 18¼ inches. And that tells us the amount of space that the pattern's already given us. And comparing it to the 19 inches, I need to add 3/4 of an inch for a proper fit. Your numbers will be slightly different. But the next thing I'm going to do is I use my quilting ruler to draw a line straight across my pattern, intersecting the 6-inch drop down mark. The larger ruler just allows me to be able to make the mark in one pass. And it's typically more straight. Same thing through the top center. All patterns will have the shoulder point marked, and you'll just transfer that marking onto your paper pattern when you adjust it. Okay. So next we're going to cut. I like to use my rotary cutter, but you can use whatever you feel most comfortable with. The important thing to remember here is to not cut through your seam allowances, which I marked when I traced my pattern out. The reason we don't want to cut that is because that gives us a hinge and will stop us from completely distorting our pattern. So you want to cut vertically and horizontally, seam allowance to seam allowance. And this will allow us to open up our pattern. Sometimes you'll get little cut-offs where we've overlapped paper, but that's okay. Unless you tear your pattern. But that's okay. You can fix it easily with a piece of tape. I just use regular printer paper, so I have to tape 4 pieces together to get a size big enough for my patterns. But if you're using pattern paper, or some people even use freezer paper, you might not have to connect pieces. Okay, the next thing we need to do is, we know that we need to add 3/4 of an inch into our pattern, and it's really easy if you're using a rotary cutting mat because the grid lines are already there. And it's as simple as just opening your pattern up 3/4 of an inch, and I use my grid. There we go. And I tape it right to the mat. It'll pull off easily in a few minutes. You're going to do the exact same thing with the bottom halves. These tilt upwards. And you're just going to match them up with that 3/4 mark. And angling these gives us the distance that we needed You can double check yourself with your flexible tape measure. And that gives me 3/4 of an inch, which means my bicep is now going to fit. For stability, you can just tape a little piece of scrap paper to the back. And your paper is going to kind of bow up at the corners, and that's fine. That's just because it's not as flexible as fabric. When you're actually cutting out your fabric piece, it will lay fine. And then I just use my rotary cutter to trim off any overhanging pieces. So we've now added our distance in the middle of the pattern. The next thing we need to do is make the bottom square. When we tilted our pattern upward, what happens is it made this lower edge, which will actually be your hem, kind of made it at an angle, so we're going to fix that. And it's really easy to do. More scrap paper. I'm going to tape it right across the bottom. And just to show you how big of a difference we got in moving the pattern, I'm going to draw a line with a Sharpie so you guys can see that it is important that you true up the bottom line. Because if you weren't to do this and you sewed your pattern, the bottom of your sleeve would have a point, and that would be kind of ugly. So as you can see, there's quite a distance that it was actually off. Should be about 3/4 of an inch, and it is. So we can trim off that excess. Cut right along the line I just drew. And that gives us a square edge across the bottom. So now we have our pattern piece adjusted. You can use this over and over again to recreate the shirts you love. So thanks for watching my video. If you have any questions, comments, or are interested in what else I'm blogging about, you can visit me at sequoialynnsews.wordpress.com. Thanks!